No llores. No. Ese valiente.
Hello everyone, I hope you are very well. I want to apologize to you for having been missing these days, but with this video you will understand why we have been a few days without uploading anything. After so much good news in these latest videos, unfortunately the good streak is over. It's suddenly over, and in the worst way. I had been wanting to tell you about Baloo for a few days, how he was with the cancer, but while I was working on the video, everything fell apart, forcing me to change my words for ones that I wish I never had to tell you. The last time we told you about Baloo was for his birthday, that a few days before he had had a small relapse, but luckily he got better for his birthday and that we were able to go celebrate there. We went on an excursion to the mountains and then he had a little party at home. You can see the video by clicking here if you didn't see it back in the day. It was a very beautiful video. Well, after his birthday, he spent a few days well, but it didn't take too long for him to feel worse again. Not fatal, but we did notice that he wasn't the same as always, which, well, in part can be understood. At the end of the day, the dog had cancer. We continued to take him to the clinic to continue with chemo sessions, the 6th, the 7th, but after the 8th, things started to go wrong, or worse than before. Baloo's lymph nodes, which until now had remained the same in terms of size, that is, they did not decrease, but they did not increase either. But after the 8th season of chemo, the lymph nodes began to swell again, even those in the stomach area and in the rear legs. It broke our hearts to see him because he really looked very emaciated, but there came a time when he woke up with tremendously swollen lymph nodes, even on the left of his head, on his temple. He had a protuberance that we no longer knew if it was another ganglion or what, but it was too much. To such an extent that we began to see his little head with a certain deformity, and furthermore, he even had some discomfort breathing.
¿Escuchaste cómo respiro?
Sí.
Se me parte el alma, Dios.
We thought that those lumps on his neck were putting pressure on him in certain way that even made it difficult for him to simply breathe.
Mi bebé.
Sí, que se muere por bostezar y no puede. It was a Saturday, and we have an appointment the following Tuesday, like every week, but we called the doctor to show her the size of those nodes, as well as the way he breathed, and she told us to take him immediately. Once in the clinic, the first thing was to take a blood sample to do tests, and although some values showed some alteration, there was nothing out of ordinary for a dog with multicentric lymphoma. Nevertheless, the doctor told us that definitively the chemotherapy treatment was not working. And after a while explaining to us the new panorama that was presented to us, she left us devastated by letting us see that if before the options of total remission were low, very low in fact, well, after this, that possibility practically vanished completely. We were talking about the alternative that we now had in terms of medication, since if we wanted to continue treating Baloo, we had to change the treatment and, unfortunately, to a more aggressive one, lomustine. In fact, this new treatment can only be applied every 21 days, unlike chemo, which was every 7 days, with breaks of a week between periods of 4 seasons. And this new treatment had a maximum of 8 seasons due to the aggressiveness of the drug. That is, we will be talking about a period of about 6 or 7 months, and after that, just what the doggy could hold without treatment. Seeing no other options available and desperate to reduce our doggy's pain, we started the new treatment right there, which was accompanied by more medication, both to prevent vomiting, protect his liver, and a diuretic, and obviously maintaining prednisolone, actually increasing it by 10 milligrams per dose. It took a couple of more days to see a considerable reduction in his lymph nodes. However, the largest lymph node of all, the one in the neck, the one that worried us the most, both because of its size as well as the difficulty it caused him to breathe, it did not reduce its size at all. Baloo spent the following days lying in bed, barely moving. He couldn't bark, he couldn't shake, he couldn't even yawn. Luckily, and at least, he did not lose his appetite, and we were able to continue giving him his medicines. But notice that his attitude was getting worse and worse. And it was something very strange because all his lymph nodes, except the one in his neck, had shrunk considerably. And we felt that this was killing him. Our little baby had a different expression. His little face was different, was just deformed. His eyes begged us to stop now with his pain. He couldn't take it anymore.
¿Tú cómo te sientes, Suki? No llores. No. Eres muy valiente.
The next day, which was last Saturday, Rebecca and I left in the morning to go to a family commitment. And when we got home, we found him worse than when we left in the morning. The node in his neck began to have a reddish color, and the poor doggy was completely paralyzed. He no longer wanted to move at all and showed a face that split our soul in two. We put ourselves in the worst. We were assessing everything. We detected the cancer in time. We contacted an oncologist as soon as possible. We immediately started the most recommended treatment by professional medicine for this type of case. And when we saw that was not responding to chemotherapy, we started him on lomustine. And after the first dose, the dog is worse than ever. We decided it was time to let him rest. We understood that he was not going to make it and that the best thing was to put him to sleep forever, to stop suffering once and for all. In fact, we were even looking at incineration options, and we came to the decision to euthanize him the next day. We made the decision, and we stayed by his side, caressing him while we cried. We cried thinking of all the things we didn't do with him and that we would have liked. How painful it was going to be the simple fact of not seeing him at home anymore, of going out adventure only with Buster from now on, that only he be the one to get out of the car when we get back home. And then...
Okay. Venga, a ver. Dios mío, Sergio.
The ganglion just exploded, and a terrible stench began to take over the room. It turned out that what we thought was a ganglion was actually an abscess, a huge ball of pus, which was so big that it burst on its own, instantly releasing Baloo from the terrible pain he was feeling. We put him in the shower to clean it because about half a liter of pus came out of it and it got all over him, and we called to a hospital for them to attend to him because it was after midnight and we wanted a veterinarian to see him since they made 2 large fissures in the neck and to clean it. Although scared, we were happy because, as I say, Baloo began to feel good instantly. And that gave us a lot of peace because it meant many things. It meant that that huge ball was not really a ganglion. That is, lomustine worked, and it did reduce all the nodes in his body. It meant that the only thing that made him feeling this bad was the abscess of the size of Mexico. But above all, it meant that we were no longer going to euthanize our dog. His face is changed and ours too. Once in the hospital, they thoroughly cleaned what was left of the abscess. They injected him with antibiotics and gave him a general checkup where they informed us of some ulcers that had developed on his gums during the week, probably due to the aggressiveness of the new treatment. So in addition to prescribing us some products to clean the abscess, they also gave us a spray to apply to those ulcers and other pills to protect his gastrointestinal mucosa. Rebecca and I spent the rest of the night with a jumble of emotions. Just a couple of hours ago, we were crying his death in life, and suddenly we were with an incredulous smile because it was surreal how close we were to euthanize Baloo. Due to an abscess that had just come out next to a ganglion, it had the shape of a ganglion, and if it did not burst at that moment, it would have made us commit the worst mistake of our lives. At this point in the history is when I wanted to upload a video telling you everything that had happened with Baloo and bring you up to date. However, and unfortunately, things got complicated again, very quickly. The day after the abscess happened, Baloo felt a little better, but not too much. Something continued to bother him. However, without an abscess and with relatively small nodes, we did not understand why he continued feeling bad. A day later, we took Baloo back to the hospital to follow up the abscess to see how the wound was progressing and to give him more antibiotics. And they told us that the wound was doing very well. We took him back home, but it only got worse and worse. The next morning, Baloo was practically paralyzed. We took him out into the garden in our arms because we understood that he had to relieve himself. He just stayed for many hours lying in bed and he could barely stand up. He would collapse on himself to lie down wherever he was, just in the grass. He doesn't used to do that. He just didn't want to stand up. The mere fact of existing hurt him. We called the oncologist and explained the situation to her because 2 days before we had told her that he was much better after the abscess burst. And we told her that we didn't know if we wanted to continue like this because when we started all this, it was to be able to offer him a good quality of life. But if the dog is going to feeling so bad, like almost the last 2 weeks, that was not any quality of life. And the last hours were being terrible, devastating, both for him and for us. The doctor told us to take him to see if there was anything we could do, that we do some tests and see what we could find out, that maybe we could give him some analgesic to reduce his pain. But when we got to the clinic and the doctor showed him, she understood the seriousness of the situation. We took Baloo out of the car in our arms And as we left him on the stretcher, he remained in the same position in which I left him. He did not move in the least. The doctor saw the ulcer that had been done in his gums. He also verified that he was beginning to show dehydration and understood that his liver was beginning to show problems. She offered him a treat that she always gave him, and he used to love it. It is a little rabbit treat, but he didn't want to eat it. She told us that if we wanted, we could do the test, but that they were definitely not going to change his prognosis, that indeed Baloo was very ill, and that despite the fact that the lomustine was very effective since the lymph nodes were reduced as expected, the animal, it had other affected areas, including the liver, as we say. And going ahead with the treatment was going to be prolonging the suffering of the animal and of ourselves. It wasn't fair for him to let him suffer more. At this point, we had already done everything we could. And if at this point Baloo was feeling so bad, he was never going to come back to feel good, no matter how much we wanted to continue forward. We were paddling against the current. So, with our hearts broken, we asked the doctor to end his suffering. And Baloo is not going to be with us anymore. We want to thank all of you who have accompanied us in this hard process, who always ask us about Baloo and who were worrying about him, about his health. Really thank you very much for your support during all these months. It has been very important for us to know that you have been there, rowing with us one way or another. But in the end, these things are like that. You never know when it's going to happen, and if it happens, unfortunately, no matter how much you fight or do to avoid it, life can be like that short and everything can end at any moment. But we had to try, and we were left with the peace that we did everything in our hands, that Baloo had the best life we could give him, full of love and adventures from the beginning and until the end of his days. So let's value each day that we are here. If your dog is still here with you, value it. Please get him in the car, go out there to spend a nice day with him, because when it's all over, those moments lived together will be all that you will have, both he and you. Thanks a lot, really, for being in our side all this time.